Shocking mockery uncovered, how a bold waitress exposed transformative truths to an arrogant CEO. Molly stood behind the counter of the diner, a small oasis of warmth in a world that sometimes felt frigid. The sun poured through the large windows, casting a golden hue over the red vinyl booths and the countless plates of pancakes and eggs that passed through her hands. She could hear the familiar sounds of sizzling on the griddle and the jangle of the bell above the door as customers filed in. It was a predictable chaos, one that she had mastered. But that morning, her routine shattered like glass when Tom and his colleagues strolled in, chattering loudly, their confidence oozing like cologne. "Can you believe this place?" Tom scoffed as he settled into a booth, scanning the diner like it was an amusement park of absurdity. "It looks like it hasn't changed since the 1950s. His laughter rippled across the room, sending a shiver down Molly's spine. Why did it matter to her what he thought? She took a deep breath, forcing the creeping unease aside, but there it lingered, an unsettling knot tightening in her stomach. She could see the reflection of her life in his condescension, her dreams, ambitions crushed beneath the weight of judgment. Serving their breakfast, she strained to focus, listening intently as Tom boasted about a new corporate project poised to wipe out small businesses like hers. Each word felt like a stab, bringing back memories of her father, whose hopes had crumbled in the wake of greed and betrayal. He had fought hard for respect, only to be scrutinized by men like Tom. Molly's heart ached, caught between fierce defiance and crippling fear. What could she, a waitress, really do against a man whose arrogance was as big as the city he came from? As she wiped down the counter, self-doubt clawed at her. What if she spoke up? Could she actually stand against him, or would she just become another target of his ridicule? She felt a tide of anger build, fighting against years of feeling small. What she wanted was to make him see her, see them, the lives he toyed with, as mere statistics. That yearning for recognition ignited a fire within her, a defiance she didn't know she still possessed. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. She could feel her cheeks flush red when she met Tom's gaze again. Each interaction became a battlefield of wits. She found herself matching his arrogance with her wit, pushing back against that dismissive smirk etched onto his face. But was she merely fanning the flames or forging a bridge? Every verbal spar felt like a whirlwind, a dance teetering on the edge of something fragile. She questioned whether he could ever truly understand her, or if he was just playing a game of superiority. Then came the moment that put her to the test. Locked in an intense debate, she couldn't ignore the realization clawing at her. What good was a voice if she only whispered? Standing before a crowd at the upcoming gala, would she muster the courage to confront Tom more publicly? The weight of her truth pressed heavily against her chest, and as she felt the heat of impending conflict rise, one thought echoed in her mind: this could be her moment, the reckoning of a lifetime. And yet, she feared if she spoke, would it edge her closer to victory or doom? With trembling resolve, she prepared for the confrontation that was sure to ignite a storm. Molly returned to her routine, the clattering dishes and bustling patrons providing a reassuring backdrop. Yet with each familiar face enter the diner, her mind was consumed by the upcoming gala where she would finally confront Tom. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, a duality that churned in her stomach like the batter on the griddle. She spent hours serving breakfast, but her thoughts drifted to the challenges ahead. What would she even say? The urge to prepare was insatiable, and as she wiped down tables, her mind raced through potential speeches and rebuttals. Each scenario played in her head like a film reel, showcasing varied outcomes: Tom smirking dismissively, laughter echoing around the venue, or standing in stunned silence as she spoke some heart-wrenching truth. As the morning transitioned to afternoon, she noticed a young girl in a booth, eyes fixed wide in admiration as she observed Molly moving through the diner. It struck her this wasn't just about herself, there were others watching. For every harsh word Tom had spoken, there were people like that girl who had dreams that might seem unreachable because of men like him. A spark ignited in Molly's heart. She was not merely a waitress, but a representation of those dreams, those whose voices had gotten lost in the noise of self-serving corporate giants. Emboldened, she began visualizing herself standing at that gala podium. What if I actually told him how he made people feel? The idea swirled around in her mind, feeding her growing sense of purpose. Yet, with the heightened stakes came crippling self-doubt. What if her words fell flat? What if her fear silenced her entirely? Determined to prepare, she spent her breaks jotting down notes, recalling her father's struggles, the ideals he stood for, and all the lessons he instilled in her. As she wrote, the words began to flow, weaving her father's legacy with the plight she observed around her. The diners, the employees she had known, each story pushing her towards a singular realization. The power of her voice stemmed from her experience and the sincerity behind it. After her shift, she stood before her bathroom mirror, rehearsing her speech while peering into her own eyes. "You belong there," she whispered, "you've lived it, felt it. Let them see." The reflection staring back was tentative but gradually transformed as confidence swelled. With each iteration of her speech, she felt layers of inhibition peel away, revealing a more potent version of herself, one she never knew existed. But then, doubt nipped at her heels like a relentless whisper. Would anyone truly listen? Would she still be the waitress in a world dominated by Tom's corporate hierarchy? Discomfort danced at the edges of her mind, trying to convince her to stay quiet, to embrace safety rather than risk condemnation. As the night of the gala approached, anxiety escalated into a palpable force. Her heartbeat thrummed in her ears, a vivid reminder that this was where she would catalyze change. The moment she had dreamed of standing up for herself was finally within reach. Yet she hesitated just before the door. The gala would start soon, she could hear the murmur of voices and the clink of glasses. Would she stride in there as the bold woman who confronted an arrogant CEO, or would she be the invisible waitress who was too scared to speak? Molly inhaled deeply, shaking off the tremors of fear. It was time. The stakes were high, but the chance to reclaim her narrative called to her louder than any voice of doubt. As she stepped forward, determined to break the silence, a question floated to the forefront of her mind: if she wasn't brave enough now, would she ever be? And with that realization igniting her spirit, she pushed the door open, ready to face whatever was waiting on the other side. Molly stepped into the gala, a whirlwind of fabric and lights illuminating the grand venue. The atmosphere buzzed with animated conversations and elegant clinks of champagne glasses, overwhelming her senses yet reinforcing her purpose. She was acutely aware of her humble attire amid sleek suits and shimmering gowns, but deep inside, she felt a potency surge within her. As she navigated through the crowd, each step echoed her heartbeat, loud and defiant amidst the soft murmurs surrounding her. Approaching the podium felt surreal, a place where she could finally voice the fears and desires that had long dwelled in her mind. Yet, the laughter and chatter felt like a wall, holding her back from the spirited release she sought. Standing tentative on the periphery, she locked eyes with Tom, his presence a stimuli for her determination. He mingled in a sea of admirers, utterly unaware of the impact his words had had on her, and on so many like her. She recalled each devastating remark, each belittling glance, and how it felt to be dismissed rather than heard. But tonight she wouldn't let that fear dictate the narrative. Summoning the voice she had sharpened over the past few weeks, she focused on the details that mattered, not her outfit or the judgment she feared, but the mission at hand. The young girl from the diner flickered back into her mind, a beacon of hopeful innocence urging her to be bold. What if her words could empower not just herself, but that girl too? As if drawn by an invisible force, Molly stepped closer to the podium, her breath steadying as she prepared for the moment. The murmurs faded into a distant hum, replaced by the echoes of her father's lessons: courage, honesty, and the tangible weight of truth. With every ounce of resolve, she exhaled slowly, gathering the fragments of doubt that whispered, "You aren't good enough." A welcoming voice beckoned her to the stage, but in that moment, hesitation swelled within her. How could her words make a dent in a world crafted by giants? Her stomach twisted, the very essence of her being screaming for her to step aside and let the familiar uncertainty reclaim her spirit. But another part resisted the burgeoning warrior who grasped the reality that change required voices willing to disrupt the norm. So she made a choice then and there. Rather than succumb to fear, she recalled every instance, every struggling employee who had received a scornful gaze or an unkind word. She would not just be a voice for herself, she would be the megaphone for all those who felt helpless in the presence of arrogance. The microphone cooled against her lips as she gripped it tightly, feeling the pulse of electricity sparking through her fingers. As she stepped into the spotlight, a silence enveloped the crowd. The moment felt infinite, stretching between what was and what could be. "Molly Hastings," she began, her voice steadier than she anticipated. "I stand here not as an employee overshadowed by corporate power, but as an individual who believes in the value of humanity, in the dreams that get trampled beneath self-serving ambitions. It's time we held each other accountable." With Tom standing mere feet away, emotions churned violently within her, the gaze of the crowd now centered and ready. She felt the gravity of their eyes, a mixture of intrigue and expectation. But midway through her opening statement, doubt flickered once more, like a candle threatened by a fierce gust. Would they be receptive? Her pulse quickened, a visceral reminder of the stakes at play. She had already opened the door to her truth, but to confront Tom directly was a different matter entirely. Before she lost her nerve, she pressed forward, each word unfolding in rapid succession. "Everyone deserves dignity, respect, and the opportunity to dream." As her voice rang out, determination soared, yet she could see Tom's brow arching in disbelief, amusement flickering in his dark eyes, as if her passion was nothing more than a performance. That only deepened her resolve. The crowd shifted, and then she spotted the young girl. From the diner again, watching expectantly, her wide eyes reflecting hope. With every word Molly spoke, she was not just addressing Tom, she was battling the long-held societal norms that shushed voices like hers. But just as the exhilaration surged within her, dread rippled beneath the surface. Would the audience remain engaged, or would they shift their loyalty back to the facade of corporate bravado, discrediting her endeavor? As hesitation clawed at her confidence, the air thickening with weighty silence, Molly clenched her jaw. This was more than an address, it was a pivotal clash between courage and fear, each moment precariously balanced on the edge of influence. Would she unleash the truths that needed to be said, even if they were met with the mockery she had dreaded for so long? Her heart surged, pressing her to act, for the battle against complacency had only begun. In that charged moment, she knew she had to push forward. The collision of her fears with her burgeoning voice marked the true beginning of something transformative, not just for herself, but for others trapped in the confines of silence. And as she locked eyes with Tom once more, clarity broke through her mental fog. This was her fight, and she wasn't backing down. Would her bravery dispel the mocking smirk that scored his features? The battle within bore down on her, demanding she find answers in the tumult of her courage. Would she transform from a mere waitress into a figure of resistance? Molly's words rang out, powerful yet precarious. The silence that dictated the room felt almost tangible, weaving through the fabric of her speech, creating a rhythm that both buoyed and threatened her confidence. She could hear each heartbeat, her own thudded against her ribs as if warning her of the potential fallout from her confrontation. As she spoke of dignity and respect, she could see faces shift, intrigue sparking excitement, but also skepticism. Would they perceive her as a threat to the status quo, or as a misguided employee miscalculating her ambition? A knot in her stomach tightened as Tom's expression oscillated between disbelief and amusement. The flicker of mockery there only emboldened her. "Molly Hastings," she had declared, but despite the self-affirmation she felt in that moment, doubts clawed at her resolve like wild animals. Could she really shatter the gleaming facade of corporate power with her voice alone? Was she enough? The fear of rejection loomed large, that suffocating feeling drawing her back like a tide, ready to pull her under. Then, as if someone flipped a switch, memories of the countless patrons she had witnessed receiving disdain and disregard flooded her mind. The tension ebbed and flowed, compelling her to stand firm. These weren't just empty words, they were a lifeline for the lost, a buoy against the tide of scorn she had encountered for far too long. She couldn't retreat, not now, with so much at stake for herself and for them. With every fiber of her being, she noted the young girl in the crowd, urging her to continue. She wasn't just an employee, she was a voice for others, an embodiment of resilience. Listen closely, she thought, because I'm not here to tiptoe around the issue. I'm here to speak the truth. Feeling a surge of adrenaline wash over her, she leaned even further into the microphone. The time for complacency is over. It's time we dismantled these walls built by words, the words that stifle dreams and suffocate aspirations. The crowd stirred, whispers dancing through the space. But even as her message gained momentum, the weight of Tom's gaze intensified. He was no longer just an audience member, he was the embodiment of the forces Molly was so fervently rallying against. She could sense a tightening in the room, an energy shifting. Would it boil down to acceptance or resentment? Molly's internal battle escalated as she felt the stares slicing through her, asking unspoken questions. Who do you think you are? What makes you worthy of this spotlight? Each inquiry threatened to unravel her newfound strength, testing her conviction. Yet, she forced herself to focus on the purpose that had ignited her courage. Change doesn't happen because we whisper around the fringes. It happens when we scream the truths that make the powerful uncomfortable, she declared, channeling every ounce of frustration and passion into each syllable. With her heart racing, she dared to venture further, addressing Tom directly. To those who wield the power, I ask you to listen, to absorb the humanity behind your decisions. Your jesting may feel harmless, but it fuels an insidious cycle. The murmur of surprise rippled through the onlookers as they absorbed the potency of her address. Here was her moment, and as she reclaimed her narrative, clarity settled over her like a cool breeze after the storm. This wasn't about winning approval, it was about unleashing a long-suppressed truth. But with every word emerging from her lips, she sensed an impending shift. Would her truth ignite a revolution, or provoke retaliation? The mingling threads of hope and dread in her mind demanded focus, pushing her to navigate through the labyrinth of possibilities unfolding before her. She needed to cut through the intimidation, cement her place at the table, and redefine what it meant to be heard. As she locked her eyes onto Tom's once more, all the old fears melted away, crystallized into a singular understanding. She was not alone in this pursuit. Just as the realization of her power began to settle, an unforeseen silence fell over the room, as if the universe had conspired to pause, holding its breath in anticipation. What would her words provoke next? Would they spark the change she sought, or fan the flames of derision that had long kept her at bay? The weight of the moment could topple either way, and Molly was ready to face the unknown unfolding before her. Molly's words hung in the air, charged with a potency that electrified the room. The anticipation was palpable, yet so was the threat of backlash from those who clung to an outdated order. She could almost hear the collective breath held by her colleagues, each wondering what the fallout from her boldness might be. Was she a beacon of hope or an unwitting catalyst for disaster? A sudden shuffling distracted her, and her attention snapped back to Tom. His expression had transformed from amusement to irritation, a reaction she did not expect but was now duty-bound to confront. While he leaned back, arms crossed, a crucible of contempt stared back at her, igniting her determination. This was not merely a battle for her dignity, it was a confrontation of ideals, one that could either empower or obliterate her. Molly took a deep breath, steadied herself, and stepped off the metaphorical cliff of uncertainty. Adrenaline coursed through her veins as she clung to her purpose. Recognition struck her, this was her catalyst for growth. She envisioned the stakes, the potential for wronged voices to finally be heard, compelling her towards even greater clarity. As she pushed through the moment's intensity, the defining question arose within her: what was her true goal? To challenge Tom's authority? No, it was more profound than that. It was about creating a ripple, igniting conversations that shifted the paradigms of respect, integrity, and empowerment. Enough with the facade of indifference, Tom. It's time to confront the consequences of your actions, she declared, her voice sharpening with conviction. She refused to retreat or soften. Exposing the truth had become her North Star, guiding her through the tumult of fear. In that instant, the room buzzed, shifting under the momentum she had conjured. Participants, once passive bystanders, were now grappling with their own complicity. Some wore expressions of contemplation while others appeared emboldened to join her. But that shift also laid bare the cracks in corporate complacency and impending fracture she couldn't ignore. Molly remembered her early days in the company when her eyes sparkled with the hope of making an impact. She sought not just a paycheck but validation of her contributions. Each day, she watched as dreams were crushed beneath the weight of indifference masked with efficiency. This inaccessible culture was what she now needed to combat. Her thoughts danced between dread and exhilaration. Could she truly dismantle such a culture? With sharp clarity, she began to see herself not just as an employee but a cornerstone of change. It was exhilarating and terrifying, a dual force promising to elevate her potential and challenge every foundation she'd known. Tom shifted uncomfortably as she continued. A leader's true worth is measured by how they treat those beneath them, not just in rank but in humanity. Your dismissiveness is a choice that reverberates far beyond these walls. The audacity in her voice unraveled years of pent-up frustration, a cathartic release of suppressed grievances. Yet, a familiar twinge of fear wheeled her back momentarily. What would happen if Tom retaliated? There was nothing she could do about an uncertain future, but she had agency over this present moment. That realization reignited her momentum, strengthening her resolve. As she closed her eyes briefly, letting the rhythm of the room wash over her, she prepared her closing thought. In this vulnerable but daring stance, she found her true voice, seizing the moment to declare, "Today marks a turning point. We must learn to uplift instead of undermine if we are to evolve together." A heavy silence followed, thick with lingering doubt and potential destiny. The crowd was frozen, the urgency of her reality echoing in the backs of their minds. Would they support radical change, or would Tom's sarcasm extinguish her fire? Just as her heart settled into the gravity of what she had unleashed, a raucous laugh punctured the tension, echoing through her very core. That singular sound, dripping with mockery, crashed like waves against her empowerment. In that moment, Molly understood, the real battle was just beginning. It would take more than just her words to shift an entrenched mindset. How would she respond to the challenge laid before her? Would she stand firm in her convictions, or would the laughter drive her back into the shadows? As the echoes of derision faded only to be replaced by murmurs of curiosity, Molly felt the urge to rise once more. She had no choice. The awakening of courage demanded she grapple with the truths she'd exposed and the foes she would now face head-on. The next confrontation awaited her, and she was determined not to falter. In the battlefield of ideas, she could either capitulate or claim her place among the resilient. The choice loomed before her, pregnant with endless possibilities. What path would she carve from this moment forward? Molly could feel the weight of every gaze, the tension making each heartbeat thud louder in her ears. She had cast her intentions into the fray, but now the laughter hung over her like a dark storm cloud. Tom's dismissive chuckle was not just an attack on her words, it was an affront to her very essence. Tremors of self-doubt gnawed at her confidence, yet something deeper rooted itself in her spirit, refusing to be silenced. In that moment, she knew she had to confront the narrative that was being spun. With each gulp of air, she crafted a plan, her mind racing through avenues of defiance and clarity. Tom's laughter would not define her destiny, it had merely illuminated the battlefield ahead. Adrenaline surged once more, igniting a conviction she hadn't quite recognized before, a realization that sparked within her a resolve to reject the status quo. "Tom," she articulated, her voice steadying into unwavering clarity, "your laughter only reveals your insecurities. The truth is unsettling, which is why you laugh instead of addressing it. This is not about me, it's about those who have suffered under your reign of indifference, the tireless workers simply trying to have their voices respected." She could sense a shift, the fraying edges of hesitance in her co-workers as they began to connect with her words. The laughter ceased, a sudden stillness filling the air. All eyes were now on Tom, his usual bravado flickering beneath the probing gaze of the room, their solidarity and unspoken agreement of support forming a collective barrier against his arrogance. Molly pressed on, "If we are to evolve into a better version of ourselves, it starts with recognizing that our culture is entrenched in fear, not empowerment. True leadership is vulnerable, it unifies through trust, not mockery. We owe it to ourselves, each one of us, to stand up and cultivate an environment where every idea is valued. Her voice grew louder, fiercer, wrapping itself around the audience's need for change. She felt her own strength crescendo, bolstered by the flickers of determination sprouting in the minds of her colleagues, yet, a voice slithered through the atmosphere, his voice cutting through her empowerment, questioning, "And what makes you think you can lead us in this, Molly? You're just one person." His tone was accusatory, a plea to undermine her conviction, but instead of shrinking back, an unfamiliar boldness surged within her. Would she let such words eclipse her unprecedented movement? "Perhaps I am only one," she responded, her eyes blazing with conviction. "But one can inspire many, and that is how change begins. We are all complicit in what has forged our reality, each of us lending our voices to the machine while suppressing our truths. I may be one voice, but if I can spark hesitation in your dominance, then consider what a chorus of us might achieve together." As the tension mounted, she could feel the burgeoning solidarity in the room. Colleagues nodded, whispers of camaraderie emerging in their ranks. Her self-definition was morphing. Molly the employee was becoming Molly the catalyst, the instigator of change, unveiling a reawakening in the very culture she had grown weary of. Tom's posture signaled fury, yet beneath that rage, she recognized something else, a flicker of uncertainty. The foundation he had built was starting to crack, and her heart swelled with the power that came from asserting her truth. Yet, she understood this was just an initial skirmish in a brewing war. As the meeting adjourned, Molly stepped into the hallway, adrenaline still flooding her system. Questions danced in her mind. What would be Tom's response to her public challenge? How would her colleagues react moving forward? Had she truly paved the path for an organizational renaissance, or had she merely laid bare her vulnerability at the mercy of indifference? Determined, she resolved to amplify the collective pulse, to harness this moment into a movement. But amidst the embers of success sparked in her spirit, a tightrope of fear remained. Facing off with Tom was only the precursor, the real test was yet to unfold. She walked towards her workspace, where the echo of laughter still lingered like a ghost uninvited, and resolved that this would mark the dawn of her transformation. With each step, she felt herself reconceiving not just her role but her impact. The collective anxiety had bridged a connection, propelling her further. Now, it was time for the next stage, a strategic confrontation with Tom. The fire in her heart screamed one undeniable truth: the time had come to face not just Tom, but the remnants of her greatest fears. What would it take to stand her ground amidst the daunting tides of received power? Would she emerge victoriously, or would the flames of confrontation reduce her cause to ash? As the weight of realization bore down upon her, she silently prepared for the pathway ahead, one rife with challenges but illuminated by newfound resolve. Molly sat at her desk, the harsh glow of her computer screen blurring her vision as thoughts swirled chaotically in her mind. The residual energy from the meeting clung to her, both exhilarating and terrifying. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown, amplifying the tension surrounding her impending confrontation with Tom. She knew that by challenging him, she had opened a door, but now she had to walk through it. She flexed her fingers, remembering the feeling of empowerment as she spoke her truth. Yet now, doubt clawed at the edges of her confidence. How would Tom retaliate? What strategies would he employ to undermine her? It was crucial that she hadn't overestimated the impact of her words. Gathering her thoughts, she began to draft a plan, a methodical approach to her next interaction with him. In her clear-eyed analysis, she realized she needed to gather allies first. Trust was a fragile thing here. Tom could pull strings in ways that could isolate her if she acted impulsively. Building a coalition might afford her some protection. As she started reaching out, she mentally prepared herself for potential resistance. She decided to begin with Emma, her colleague in the marketing department. Emma was quietly assertive and respected among peers. Molly observed her over coffee breaks, how her calm demeanor often drew people in. If anyone could support Molly's call to action, it was Emma. After a casual exchange about the need for corporate change, Molly broached the topic of group discussions on workplace culture. "Molly, it's about time someone said it," Emma replied, leaning in. "I've felt that discontent too, especially regarding Tom and the way he handles feedback." The heartfelt response sparked hope in Molly, giving her the conviction to reach out to others in her circle, stitching together a tapestry of shared frustrations. The next few days passed with a blend of anticipation and anxiety. Molly gathered snippets of encouragement, weaving her network of support without alerting Tom to her growing influence. Each conversation reaffirmed her belief that they could forge a movement, one voice leading to many. But she also felt the weight of her newfound mantle. She was stepping into a role that demanded unwavering authenticity. Then came the moment of confrontation with Tom. He summoned her to his office, and as she walked towards his door, her stomach clenched with tension. The air was thick, filled with the echoes of unsaid words and unexpressed concerns from her colleagues. "What's this I hear, Molly?" he started, his tone dripping with condescension. "You think you can gather the troops against me? You've turned into quite the revolutionary." In that instant, something shifted. The confident facade she had cultivated emboldened her to hold his gaze. "It's not that simple, Tom. This isn't just about you or me. It's about what's right for all of us. It's about dignity and respect in a workplace that demands both." Her boldness surprised even her, a stark contrast to the timid employee he had often dismissed. Tom narrowed his eyes, the tension coiling tighter. For a fleeting moment, she saw a flicker of vulnerability behind his steely exterior, an unsettling look that hinted at fear rather than just anger. This was her opportunity. She leaned in closer, her voice steady. "You might see this as a threat, but it's a call for evolution. Together, we can cultivate a work environment where ideas aren't stifled. I'm not looking for a fight, I'm looking for resolution, for everyone's sake." Tom's face hardened, but there was a crack, a slight tremor in his reaction. She pressed on with fervor, energizing her resolve with every word. Would he perceive this as a challenge, or would it awaken a self-reflective spark to facilitate change? Molly could almost see the gears turning in his mind. The power dynamics felt beautifully precarious, as if she were teetering on a tightrope that led directly within the vulnerabilities of the empire he ruled. "Don't think for a second I want to fight back," he warned, the threat lingering thick in the encapsulating air. "Fight back. Or finally listen," she retorted. As the silence enveloped them, she remained firm, anchored by convictions he couldn't easily dismiss. There was a palpable tension hanging between them, two forces colliding in an uncharted territory. The air crackled with uncertainty. Molly had come here to confront Tom, and while it was a leap into the unknown, she felt stronger with each heartbeat. What could it mean if she didn't back down? But as the meeting lurched towards a close, she wondered, would this moment be the catalyst that ignited change or simply another stumbling block in her path? With her heart racing and her limbs tingling, she prepared for a response that would either spiral into a decree of executive resistance or open the floodgates to genuine dialogue. The stage was set, the next step could reshape everything. What would Tom choose? And more importantly, what would it reveal about them both? Molly exited Tom's office, her mind swirling with a mixture of adrenaline and uncertainty. The confrontation had been unnervingly intense, and although she felt a newfound strength coursing through her, dread also seeped in. He had not outright dismissed her, nor had he embraced her ideas. He had leaned into the confrontation, reminding her just how precarious her position still was. The words, "I want to fight back, but finally listen," echoed in her ears, haunting her. In that moment, she realized she stood at a pivotal nexus in her career, either continue down this path of challenging the status quo or retreat into the flimsiness of her previous role. As she walked through the bustling office, colleagues passed by, their expressions a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. The whispers of her ambition ignited hope in others, but with this ignited hope came a heavy weight of responsibility. Back at her desk, the bright screen seemed to mock her apprehensions. She sat down, tapping her pen against the paper, trying to plot her next moves. It was suddenly clear to her that if she were to see genuine change, she needed a deeper understanding of the organizational dynamics at play. Tom might have held the reins of authority, but she suspected there were others, people quietly discontented but too intimidated to speak out. Molly thought of Emma and their discussions. Harnessing this discontent meant acknowledging the power in their numbers. She opened her inbox and began sending messages to a select few of her colleagues, not only to gain support but also to solicit candid feedback about their experiences with Tom. The idea was to cultivate an environment where these voices could emerge safely, a place where they could share insights without fear. Days rolled on as she collected promises of inclusion from her coworkers. With each interview, she found patterns emerging, not just experiences of discontent, but hidden talents and strengths among her peers. Jacob from IT was a talented programmer but shared a deep desire to facilitate team building. Lisa from HR had once been an organizational psychologist and lamented the absence of mental health discussions in the workplace. Each of their personal narratives resonated with the same thread of unfulfilled potential in the current oppressive atmosphere. After compiling their insights, Molly organized a clandestine meeting after hours at a nearby cafe, intending to solidify the bonds they had formed. As they spoke freely over coffee, the momentum began to build, ideas flowing from one person to the next like a well-rehearsed symphony. What started as frustration transformed into vision. Ideas emerged on how they could communicate their thoughts effectively to Tom without igniting his defenses. Reflecting on their discussion later that evening, Molly experienced a spark of possibility. Perhaps Tom was more interested in maintaining his position than listening to their grievances. But what if they approached their concerns not as adversaries, but as collaborators? Could they present their ideas as beneficial to Tom's ambitions as well? Her mind raced with strategies as she sketched out potential writing drafts, proposals advocating for changes that promoted productivity, creativity, and individual well-being, while also painting the picture for Tom of a synergistic community he could lead. But as she sat there, buoyed by her burgeoning plans, an unsettling question loomed: would he see through the facade of their collective camaraderie? Could he coax dissent from their ranks by attempting to pit their personalities against one another? Doubt nagged at her. As she headed to bed that night, a mix of excitement and fear weighed heavily on her. She knew her next steps would be crucial. They could either build a platform for change or threaten to dismantle everything they had created together. Tomorrow she would have to approach Tom again, this time not just with a call for recognition, but with an entire strategy crafted not just for her voice but for every voice he thought he could ignore. What would be the first words out of her mouth this time? And how would Tom react when confronted with a united front? The stakes felt higher than ever before, and certainty clung tantalizingly just out of reach. Molly woke the next morning with a determined pulse thrumming beneath her skin. The weight of her ambitions had shifted from burden to motivation, and the stakes felt vivid against her consciousness. She envisioned the meeting with Tom, the carefully crafted words spiraling in her mind. Was it fear or excitement that propelled her forward? Perhaps a blend of both. After her morning routine, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and rehearsed the conversation. "We need to talk about leadership," she whispered, watching her own reflection. It sounded bold. Yet, intense discomfort coiled in her stomach as she recognized the inherent risks. The sharp contrast to her past hesitancies only intensified her resolve. She had initiated something that could grow into a full-blown transformation, and she needed this to work. Arriving at the office, the usual barrage of distractions mixed with anticipation hung in the air. Conversations hummed softly around her like a distant murmur, but her focus remained locked on the task ahead. She felt empowered by the collective knowledge she had gathered, akin to holding a deck of cards that could tilt the game in her favor. She approached Tom's office with her strength in numbers in mind. Each step resonated with the echoes of the hours spent in the cafe, shaping ideas into a unified vision. The thought gave her confidence, but self-doubt still crept in quietly. Would he dismiss them as rebels without a cause, or see their aspirations as threats? Knocking on his door, she felt her stomach clench tightly. "Come in," his voice barked through the wooden barrier, firm and authoritative. Opening the door felt monumental, a fissure into a new reality where she asserted control over her own narrative. Tom looked up, flipping through his papers, briefly raising an eyebrow. "Molly, this better be important." "Actually, I think it's imperative," she said, forcing the words through the sheer weight of her determination. Even as she spoke, she noted the tension tightening in his jaw, a body language warning sign of defensiveness. She took a deep breath. I've been speaking with some of our teammates, and I've gathered insights that I believe could genuinely enhance the productivity and morale in our department. His interest piqued, but she could sense skepticism brewing behind his casual demeanor. And what exactly are you suggesting? That we change the course of our established strategies based on whose opinions exactly? Molly clenched her fists, steadying herself against the dismissive tone. Not just opinions, Tom. They're experienced insights from people with tremendous untapped potential. The dissatisfaction is palpable, and if we harness it, it could transform our team dynamics into something robust and innovative. Tom leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. Molly, you need to understand that people's personal grievances do not translate to a company strategy. What they want isn't always feasible. Taking the leap, she boldly countered, but I'm not just representing their grievances, I'm here to advocate for a synergy that actually serves your vision as a leader, too. Imagine a cohesive team empowered to pursue both personal growth and company goals. Doesn't that sound like a win-win? The silence between them stretched like a taut wire. Tom's brows furrowed deeper, an unreadable expression washing over his features. For a moment, they were locked in a verbal chess game, each weighing the moves. All right then, he finally said, a slight edge to his voice. Let us see your strategy in writing. But understand, I am not here to hand over the reins of leadership. Victory surged through her, mixed with an unsettling realization. She had initiated the first round, but this was only the beginning. As she left his office, a twist formed in her gut. Presenting her colleagues' ideas might shift more than just Tom's perception. It could inadvertently reveal vulnerabilities within her ranks. Trust was fragile, and the cracks were just beginning to show. With a pounding heart, she wondered if the tapestry of combined thoughts they had woven was as solid as she hoped, or just a facade waiting to unravel. As she sat down at her desk, the clock ticked ominously toward the deadline she had given herself. Would she be able to pivot their collective energies into something that could withstand scrutiny, or did her boldness risk setting them all up for failure? The next step loomed before her, a jagged cliff over an uncertain abyss. The moment of truth approached, and her resolve would be tested like never before. Molly stood at the precipice of transformation, acutely aware of the power she now held in her hands. After weeks of navigating the turbulent waters of confrontation, she had gained momentum. As she reviewed the strategies she drafted for Tom, there was a newfound clarity coursing through her, a conviction bolstered by not only her own experiences but the voices of her colleagues. It was now or never. She would cement her position not just as a waitress, but as a leader advocating for change. The day had arrived to present her carefully crafted proposal. She meticulously organized the insights gathered from her teammates into a comprehensive plan that highlighted both individual aspirations and collective goals. Each page reflected their frustrations and ambitions, amalgamated into a vision that challenged the status quo. It was more than a mere document. It was a manifesto of empowerment that echoed their collective truths. As she approached Tom's office once more, a sense of purpose radiated through her veins. No longer an anxious employee, Molly embodied the will of a united front prepared to advocate for a healthier workplace culture. She knocked, and the authoritative call of "come in" resonated through her, emboldening her heart. Tom's gaze met hers expectantly, and she recognized the shift in their dynamic. "Molly, I presume you have more for me today?" he inquired, adopting the facade of indifference that only masked the challenge she posed. "Yes, I do," she answered, unfurling her document, her hands steadied by the countless conversations held in hushed tones over coffee. "I've compiled feedback from our team regarding workplace strategies and culture, aiming for a collaborative approach that could enhance productivity while fostering an environment of respect and empowerment." Tom leaned back, skepticism written all over his features. But this time, Molly felt equipped to combat his dismissal with the backing of her peers who shared the room's weight on their shoulders. "Let us cut to the chase, shall we? Are you suggesting that our established methods should shift based solely on dissatisfaction?" He challenged, attempting to undermine her with grandiosity. Molly took a deep breath, standing taller than she ever thought possible. Actually, it isn't solely based on dissatisfaction, it's grounded in a vision that involves empowering each individual in this organization. Your leadership gains nothing from ignoring the needs and potential of your team. A flicker of admiration crossed his face, though he masked it swiftly. Go on, he replied, intrigued despite his efforts to maintain a hardened facade. As she detailed the strategies drafted with her colleagues, she could sense the room shifting, curiosity blooming over doubts. The details of team days, inclusion initiatives, and mentorship programs formed a narrative of hope and progress. With each point articulated, Molly saw a door creak ajar, a realization dawning within Tom that this conversation was not about power but partnership. By the end, she concluded with a call to action that resonated in the silence of the room. Together, we can serve the company's interests while honoring the humanity within our team. It's not about relinquishing your authority, but about embracing the responsibilities of a leader who listens and invests in their people. There was a pause as Tom processed her words, the cogs of his decision-making visibly shifting. And if these strategies fail? He questioned, digging for the foothold of his control. Molly's reassurance echoed through her. Failure is merely a stepping stone to success. We can adjust and learn, but first, we need to try. Tom's fingers were steepled under his chin as he stared at her, contemplating the challenge before him. Very well, I will review your proposal further. But understand, I won't hesitate to reassert my leadership should this turn south. Molly sensed a subtle shift, the emergence of a new dynamic, one where her voice mattered. I know that, and I welcome it. Let us pave way for accountability and resilience. As she left his office, waves of victory and apprehension danced through her. The very act of standing firm and advocating for herself and her colleagues had redefined her role in the organization. The initial fears began to fade. Within her heart now lay a spark of change ignited from bravery, authenticity, and respect for the lives affected by indifference. In the following weeks, Molly watched her colleagues reactivate their passions, emboldened by her actions. Each meeting, each shared idea recycled into a growing culture of inclusivity, elevated camaraderie among once silent employees. The transformation had not only shifted the office dynamic, but it had rebuilt a sense of pride that had long been eroded. A few months later, she received recognition at an all-hands meeting, a position on the collaborative task force dedicated to reshaping workplace culture. Tom commended her initiative, presenting her as an invaluable asset to the transformation we aspire to undergo. In that moment, accolades felt weightless. It was her collective efforts and shared voice that had paved the path to this recognition, radiating fulfillment and an indomitable sense of achievement. Molly departed the meeting with her head held high, the laughter and mockery that once reverberated in her memory replaced by applause. The woman who had entered that diner in insecurity had burgeoned into a voice of strength, a beacon of resilience and authenticity. This journey had transformed Molly, not just into a voice for her own dreams, but into an advocate for others to reclaim theirs, the very vision she had once only dared to whisper in the shadows. You need to subscribe now to witness more incredible transformations like Molly's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these compelling stories reach more souls craving inspiration. Comment your reactions and theories about Molly's journey, because your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.